My daughter forgot to hang up the phone. That's how I heard it. It's time to put him in a nursing home. He's a burden. I didn't say anything, but in that moment, something in me broke. I sold the house for $890. They came back from a business trip smiling. But there was a surprise waiting for them. The keys did not fit the door. They found a note on the doorstep. And after reading it, they started screaming. And then I realized they wouldn't just leave it alone. This was just the beginning. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you're listening in the comments. The phone rang just as I scraped the last of the meatloaf from my plate. It was Maggie's recipe, though mine never tasted quite right without her touch. I glanced at the caller ID and felt that familiar warmth pull at something aching inside my chest. Ashley, hey, Dad, how are you holding up? Her voice carried that practiced brightness she always used when she wanted to sound caring. I settled into Maggie's old recliner, the leather worn smooth from her evening reading sessions. Oh, you know me, I said, just finished dinner, about to watch the news. I didn't mention it was leftovers from 3 days ago. I didn't mention I'd spent the last hour staring at Maggie's photograph on the mantel, wondering how a house could feel so full of furniture and yet so empty. Are you eating enough? Ashley asked. You know you can order groceries online now. Right, I showed you the app. I'm eating just fine, I lied, clearing my throat, though I had a little scare yesterday. Forgot to turn the burner off under my coffee pot. Good thing I smelled it from the living room. There was a pause. I could see her face in my mind, frowning. That little crease forming between her eyebrows. She got that look from her mother. Dad, maybe we should talk about getting someone to check on you more regularly. Ryan thinks I'm fine, I added quickly. Really? How's your business trip going? You're still in Phoenix? Yes, she sighed. Conference ends tomorrow. Ryan's been handling most of the client meetings while I sit through endless presentations about digital marketing trends. She laughed, but it sounded thin, forced. Well, I shouldn't keep you, I said. I love you, sweetheart. Love you too, Dad. Take care of yourself. Okay, click. I reached for the receiver to hang up my end, when I heard it. Rustling, fabric, a zipper. She must have dropped her phone into her purse. Then voices, muffled at first, but clear enough. Ashley's voice, without the sugar. You see how he's deteriorating. Ryan, he forgot to turn off the stove yesterday. What if he burns the house down? Ryan's voice slipped in, calm, cold, calculating. It's time for a nursing home. Ashley, he's becoming a burden. Your dad's a good man, but he can't live alone anymore. My fingers went numb. The phone slipped from my hand and clattered against the hardwood floor, the same floor Maggie and I installed 23 years ago. The house is worth almost $1 million now. Ashley continued, her tone shifting to pure strategy. In Denver's market, we could probably get $900,000, maybe more. Exactly, Ryan said. We sell it, put him somewhere decent, not too expensive, and finally get that house in Boulder. The one with the mountain view. And then, my daughter laughed. God, Ryan, you should have seen him tonight. So grateful just to hear from me. He has no idea we're planning this. We should strike while he still trusts us. The world didn't go silent. No, everything grew louder. The ticking of the grandfather clock, Maggie's 15-year anniversary gift. The hum of the refrigerator. The creak of the house we built. I stared at Maggie's photo. Her eyes seemed different now. Less warm, more knowing. Was it disappointment, a warning, or grief? I don't know how long I sat there. The house felt different, as if the walls had heard the betrayal and were holding their breath. When I finally stood, something inside me stood too. Not anger, not heartbreak, resolve. I walked to the kitchen drawer, the one with folded receipts and dusty paperwork Maggie always told me to throw out. My hands knew what they were searching for. The records. 20 years of sacrifice. University tuition, $48. Wedding expenses, $32. Car loans I co-signed. Specializes in fast closings. Investor-ready listings. Testimonials. Sold our house in 6 days. Cash buyer within 48 hours. No delays. I dialed his number. Whitman Real Estate. This is Kevin. His voice was steady, confident, the tone of a man who didn't waste time. Mr. Whitman, I said, my name is Frank Bennett. I'm interested in selling my house. Quickly. How quickly? 10 days or less. A pause. Then, tell me about the property. I looked around at the home I once built with love. Cherry Creek area. 2 stories. 3.400 square feet. Built 1999. Original owner. Immaculate condition. Custom woodwork throughout. Kevin's tone sharpened. Would you be open to an on-site assessment? How soon? I can be there this afternoon. 3 p.m. I hesitated. Just a moment. I'll be here. After hanging up, I stood in the living room and touched the bay window I built for Maggie, the place she sat every morning with tea and mystery novels. I imagined Ashley's voice. He has no idea what we're planning. And for the first time since Maggie died, I felt something close to clarity. This wasn't abandonment. This wasn't cruelty. This was consequence. Right on time. 3 p.m. The doorbell rang. I opened it to find Kevin standing with a leather portfolio. Eyes already scanning the trim, the crown molding, the hand-finished floors. Mr. Bennett, he said, stepping inside. I have to say, you weren't exaggerating. He moved slowly, reverently, like he was walking through a museum. These floors, did you install them? My wife wanted something that would last. I replied, so I learned to make them myself. Kevin nodded. There's a story in every board. He opened his tablet. Let me show you a few comps. He angled the screen toward me. Houses. Numbers. 850.00. 910.00. 895.00. Given the craftsmanship, he said, I'd list yours at $890. And I have a group of investors who buy cash. They won't haggle. They won't stall. What's the catch? I asked. Kevin smiled. No catch. Cash buyers don't need banks. They inspect. They sign. They wire. And how long? 10 days. 10 days. Just enough time. Do it, I said. No tremor. No second thought. Kevin extended his hand. I'll have the contracts ready by morning. When he left, the house was silent again. But not empty. No, for the first time in a long time. It was full of something I hadn't felt since Maggie died. Control. I sat in her reading chair and let the reality settle. My daughter once told me I was the best father in the world. She was wrong. I was simply the last one willing to sacrifice. And now, I was done saving people who had already buried me in their minds. They thought I would go quietly. They were wrong. I wasn't done yet. I was just getting started. Kevin arrived the next morning with contracts, a notary, and coffee for everyone, the kind of professional efficiency that makes you feel like the decision has already said yes for you. We sat at my kitchen table, the same table where Maggie and I once argued over tile samples and tuition payments, and I read every line with the same thoroughness that used to carry me through blueprints. Sale price, $890. Cash purchase. Closing date, 10 business days from signing. Minimal contingencies. Clear title. Final walkthrough. Occupancy. Seller may remain in the property for 30 days after closing if needed. The notary, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes, slid pages to me with practiced patience while Kevin answered what few questions I still had. That's correct, Mr. Bennett, she said softly when I looked up about the occupancy clause. Most sellers prefer to move sooner for peace of mind. But you have the right. Peace of mind. I almost laughed. The only peace I wanted was to watch Ashley and Ryan discover what the burden had done. I signed my name with a steady hand and felt the first chain loosen. The next 3 days passed in a blur of necessary strangers. The title company began digging through decades of records like archaeologists sifting a life. The investors sent their team. Polite professionals who admired the meticulous work as if I were already a story from the past. Your contractor really knew what he was doing, one of them said, assuming the original owner was long gone. I didn't correct him. On days 4 through 6, I became a man with a quiet mission. I researched apartments in the city the way I once researched joist spans and load calculations, methodically. unemotional, exact. I wanted a place that was small, clean, and anonymous, a lock, a key, and a bed that belonged to me and no one else's plans. I found a community in Highlands, quiet streets, a small park, a community center where people my age played cards and pretended time didn't move. "We have a furnished one-bedroom available for immediate occupancy," said the property manager over the phone. Ms. Angela Chen. Calm voice. No prying questions. "Month to month if you prefer flexibility." "I prefer flexibility," I said, and once the words were out, I felt a strange, cool wind move through my chest. On days 7 through 9, confidence replaced adrenaline. I woke each morning to the sound of the grandfather clock and felt, for the first time in a long time, that it ticked for me. The inspector's car in the driveway didn't make me flinch. The email pings from the title company didn't make my hands shake. I packed quietly. Maggie's jewelry box. Our wedding photo. The novel she never finished with her bookmark still at page 247. My engineering certificates. The file of documents you save when you know the past has weight. I left almost everything else. The furniture could tell its stories to someone new. The photo albums of Ashley's childhood stayed too. I couldn't carry that kind of gravity into a smaller life. Mrs. Dorothy Whittaker from next door noticed the parade of polite clipboards. "Everything all right, Frank? Just some work," I said, and hated the half-truth. On the evening of day 8, Kevin called. "Everything's on track for tomorrow's closing, Mr. Bennett. The buyers are thrilled with the inspection results. Wire transfer will be completed the same day. You'll have access to funds immediately." "Thank you, Kevin." I packed a single suitcase that night, clothes, a few personal items, not because I had to move yet, but because being ready felt like the right way to breathe. I looked at Maggie's photograph and said, "I hope you understand." Friday morning arrived bright and unapologetic. The kind of Denver day Maggie would have called a postcard. I wore the navy suit she bought me for Ashley's college graduation and drove to the title office with the quiet courtesy of a man who has nothing left to prove. Inside, it was all efficiency and the gentle hush of expensive pens. The buyers were represented by a sharp attorney who checked each line like she suspected words of carrying knives. Kevin orchestrated the paperwork with the ease of a conductor. "Mr. Bennett, sign here and here, initial there," he said, and each signature felt like cutting another tether. Deed transfer, settlement statement, a notary stamp that sounded like a gavel. "And this is your wire transfer confirmation," the closer said, sliding a paper toward me. $890, less closing costs, has been deposited to your account. I stared at the numbers until they were just shapes. More money than I had ever seen together in one place. More money than Ashley and Ryan had already spent in their minds. We shook hands all around, the way people do when they have finished a clean piece of business. Kevin walked me to my truck. "You made the right choice, Mr. Bennett. Sometimes a fresh start is exactly what we need." I drove home past the elementary school where Ashley learned to hold a pencil. Past the park where Maggie and I used to walk slow because time felt generous back then. Instead of nostalgia, I felt air in my lungs. I pulled into the driveway and didn't turn off the engine. I just stared at the house that was no longer mine and felt the keys heavy in my palm. New owners or not, the contract gave me 30 days. Enough time to finish what I had begun. I went inside, walked through each room one last time as its owner. The kitchen where Maggie made coffee on granite we chose by saving for months. The living room where I learned the angles for a bay window because a magazine photo made her eyes light up. The bedroom where she died holding my hand while machines kept count of everything except the only thing that mattered. "I'm sorry," I told her memory, which had always felt close in that room. "But you warned me." I locked the door and sat in the truck until the engine's ticking matched the clock. Then I took out my phone and made the next call in a plan that no longer felt like revenge so much as alignment. I called a storage company and arranged for Ashley and Ryan's belongings to be packed and held under their names. I called Ms. Chen and told her I'd take the apartment. I'd be by with deposit and first month's rent in cash. I opened a new list in my notebook: short, neat, inevitable, change of address, utilities, bank appointment to move the wire into a safer structure, and one more item I wrote smaller than the rest: locks. That evening, I carried my suitcase to the front door and paused. Somewhere out there, Ashley and Ryan were planning my future with the confidence of people who believed the ink was dry on their story. Somewhere, they were laughing about boulder and mountain views. Somewhere, they were sure the door would always open for them. I set the suitcase down, took a breath that didn't hurt, and turned the key. Tomorrow I would hand this set to the new owners. Tonight, I still had work to do. I left the house that evening with only a suitcase in my trunk and the keys to a life my daughter thought she controlled. But I drove with a calm I had not felt since before Maggie died. The calm of a man who had already buried his past and chosen not to dig it back up. And as I pulled into the parking lot of Sunset Manor Apartments, the modest senior community I had arranged through Ms. Angela Chen, I realized I was entering a place where no one knew me as anyone's father, anyone's burden, just a man renting a quiet one-bedroom with cash. And she met me at the office door with a clipboard and a set of keys. Her expression professional but kind. Month to month. Mr. Bennett, like you requested, no credit checks necessary, she said, and I signed the lease without hesitation, handing over the deposit and first month's rent. Nearly $3,000, money that once would have made me flinch, but now felt lighter than air. And inside the small apartment, blank walls and generic furniture greeted me like a witness protection program for the soul. No photographs, no memories, no expectations, just space, and I placed Maggie's photo on the nightstand first because I refused to leave her behind. Even if I had left everything else. Then I unpacked the essentials: her jewelry box, our wedding picture, the blue tie she said made me look like the man she believed I could be. And when I finished, I stood there and listened to the silence. Not the heavy silence of an abandoned home, but the clean silence of a beginning. The next morning I woke early and made coffee in a kitchen that didn't know my hands. And while it brewed, I opened my laptop and searched banks that were discreet. Smaller institutions where $900,000 wouldn't trigger questions or invitations to luncheons. And that's how I found Colorado Community Bank. Private banking division, managed by a man named Mark Daniels, whose biography mentioned working with long-term clients, estate transitions, high-level confidentiality, all the words a man in my position wants to see. So I dialed the number, and when his assistant transferred the call, Mark answered with a tone that suggested calm seas and locked vaults. "Mr. Bennett, I'd be honored to assist you. When would you like to come in?" "Monday, 9 a.m., I said, and wrote the appointment in my notebook. Under a single word: freedom. The weekend passed like a reconnaissance mission, testing the neighborhood, walking to the small cafe down the street where a barista named Chloe remembered orders after one visit and didn't ask about families. And I sat by the window with black coffee, watching strangers walk dogs and push strollers, living lives untouched by betrayal. And I almost envied them. Almost, but not quite, because they hadn't felt what I had felt that night on the hardwood floor, the clarity of severing the last thread. When Monday came, I put on the same suit I had worn to the closing, because I believed in rituals of armor, and drove to the brick building that housed Colorado Community Bank, where Mark Daniels greeted me in a private office lined with framed photos of landscapes. Not family, a man who understood the importance of boundaries. And he listened as I explained I had sold my home and wished to protect the proceeds privately and securely. Without joint accounts, without beneficiaries waiting like wolves. And he nodded, taking notes. "We can initiate the wire transfer today, Mr. Bennett. Funds will clear by Wednesday. And I recommend our premium security package. Dual verification, private access codes," and I signed the forms. Initials and signatures flowing easier than breath. And when he handed me my new checkbook, debit card, and online login, I realized that everything Ashley and Ryan thought they were entitled to had vanished into numbers they would never see. By Wednesday afternoon, Mark called to confirm. Funds have cleared. Mr. Bennett, your account is fully active. And I thanked him without ceremony. Then hung up and stared around my small apartment. Walls still bare, counters still empty, but it was mine, every inch mine. And that night, I sat with Maggie's photo and said, "They will never touch what we built." And I meant it. Not as bitterness, but as covenant. It was Thursday evening when my phone rang. Ashley's name lighting the screen like a ghost that didn't know it had died. And I let it ring twice before answering with a warmth I no longer felt. "Hey, sweetheart," I said, steady as stone, and her voice was honey dipped in poison. "Dad, we have the most wonderful news. Ryan and I have been planning something special for you." And I listened as she spoke of a place, a resort. She called it, with medical staff, private rooms, gentle care. "It's beautiful, Dad, you'll love it there. You need rest, you've done enough." And she had no idea how right she was. And she had no idea how much I had already done. And when she paused, waiting for my gratitude, I said, "Actually, Ashley, I have a surprise for you too, when you get back." And she laughed. Delighted, clueless. "Oh, Dad, you're so sweet, we'll talk all about it on Friday." And I said, "Yes, Friday." And when she hung up, I looked at the empty room around me and whispered, "Come home, Ashley, come home and find what you left behind." I ended the call and stared at the silence she left behind. A silence that no longer hurt but hummed with the certainty of what was coming. And on Friday morning, I woke before dawn, brewed coffee, and opened my laptop to order the final instrument of clarity, a wireless mini surveillance camera disguised as a simple phone charger. Motion activated, Wi-Fi enabled, capable of streaming directly to my phone from anywhere. And it arrived by afternoon. A small unremarkable box that held the final witness to everything they believed I could not see. And I tested it on the kitchen counter, watching my own face appear on the screen. Older, harder, but not broken, never broken. Then I packed it carefully into my jacket pocket, along with the letter I had rewritten 3 times until it carried the exact weight of truth. No heavier, no lighter. At dusk, I drove back to the house that was no longer mine but still held my echo. Using the garage opener I had never surrendered, gliding inside like a ghost. And I placed the camera in the front hallway, where it faced the door with perfect precision, its digital eye ready to receive the faces of those who once called me burden. And I taped the envelope to the inside of the front door. At eye level, impossible to miss, impossible to plead ignorance. Then I walked each room one last time, not as a farewell, but as an audit, confirming that nothing remained of me except what I chose to leave. And when I stepped outside, locking the door with the key that would soon mean nothing, I did not look back. The next afternoon, I sat in my apartment, phone in hand, the camera feed open, the timestamp reading 5:14 p.m., knowing Ashley always insisted on leaving early to avoid traffic. And at 5:16, motion detected, the alert flashing, and there it was, Ryan's black SUV pulling into the driveway. Luggage in the trunk, smiles on their faces, the smiles of people arriving to claim what was never theirs. And I watched Ashley step out first, brushing hair from her face, reaching for her keys, laughing at something Ryan said. And then she approached the door, key ready, certain, and when it didn't turn, I saw her frown, small at first, then deeper, confusion turning to annoyance. "What's wrong with this lock?" she said, her voice clear through the camera audio. "Try your key," Ryan replied, and I watched him test the garage, the back door, each metal refusal slicing through his certainty. "These are new locks," he muttered, panic rising. "Someone changed the locks." And Ashley's voice lifted, sharp and cracking. "That's impossible. Dad doesn't even know a locksmith." And then she pulled out her phone and dialed my home line, disconnected 3 days prior. Listening to nothing. No ring, no voicemail, just absence. "Try his cell," Ryan snapped. And Ashley nearly screamed. "He doesn't have a cell, remember?" But she was wrong. I had one now, just not for her. I watched her climb through the kitchen window I had left unlatched. Watched her cross the living room, And then she saw it, the envelope on the door, her name and Ryan's in my careful handwriting. And she tore it open with hands that no longer trembled from control but from consequence. Eyes racing across each line I had written in ink that would not fade. If you are reading this, it means you arrived too late. I heard everything. I heard you call me burden. I heard you count my house, my life, like currency. I sold it. $890,000. Cash. It is gone. Safe, where you will never touch it. Your belongings are in storage. You have 30 days to claim them. You forgot who built this place. You forgot who I was. Now remember. I watched Ashley's face collapse. Watched Ryan snatch the letter. Watched their blame ignite like dry timber. How could he do this to us? She cried. And Ryan fired back. How could you be so careless? And there, in my empty living room, they argued not about me, not about love, but about loss, about money, about plans undone, and I ended the feed. Because I had seen enough. I set my phone down and reached for the bottle of Bordeaux Maggie and I had been saving for an anniversary that never came. And I poured a glass, holding it up to the photograph on my nightstand. To you, Maggie, I whispered, justice served, and I drank. Not to forget, but to remember that I had kept my promise. Not to them, but to myself. Because they believed silence was surrender. But they never understood. Sometimes silence is strategy. I powered off my phone after watching their panic, deleting the message notifications that began pouring in within minutes. Because I knew what they would contain, demands disguised as concern. Outrage cloaked in filial duty. The sudden discovery that the man they dismissed as a burden still had the power to lock him out, and I refused to give them the stage for their performance. Refused to offer them an audience for their bewilderment. Because I had given them everything already. Years of labor, decades of sacrifice, and I owed them nothing now. Not even an explanation. The apartment was quiet when I set the phone face down on the table. The only sound the distant hum of traffic and the refrigerator's gentle pulse. A peaceful monotony that felt cleaner than any comfort I had known inside that grand house. And I stood there with Maggie's photograph, tracing my finger along the frame, whispering, "It's done," not as victory, but as release. The next morning, I began to build a life from the smallest pieces. Shopping for groceries for one. Choosing simple meals without memory attached. And when the cashier asked if I had any rewards card, I shook my head, understanding that anonymity was the final gift I could give myself. Days passed without names, without obligations, marked only by morning walks and quiet coffee. And I found a routine in walking the perimeter of the park near the apartment, where no one knew me as father or widower or benefactor, and the world did not expect anything from me except presence. And I gave it that. On the 5th day after they returned to the house they believed they still owned. I stopped checking the camera feed entirely, not because I didn't care, but because caring had become too expensive a habit, and I refused to spend any more of myself on their grief. I imagined Ashley pacing, calling attorneys, demanding loopholes that did not exist, and Ryan cursing fate, insisting there had to be recourse, never admitting that the man they once dismissed as confused had outmaneuvered them with perfect clarity. Their world had cracks now, fractures in the narrative where they were the responsible heirs, the dutiful children, and those cracks would widen with every unopened door, every returned letter, every silence they could not penetrate. Meanwhile, I sat in the small kitchen of my apartment, sipping coffee that tasted like distance. And for the first time in years, I did not rehearse grief. I did not replay arguments with ghosts. I did not yearn to be understood. I simply existed, quietly, deliberately, like the foundation beneath a building long since abandoned. One afternoon, I walked into Colorado Community Bank, not as a desperate man shielding assets, but as a client discussing long-term planning. And when Mark Daniels asked if I had heirs I wished to designate, I told him, not anymore, and he nodded, not prying, entering the code that would lock my account behind layers of verification only I controlled. Later, I withdrew a small sum in cash, crisp bills that meant I could choose dinner, or a newspaper, or a bus ticket to anywhere. and I marveled at how little I needed to feel sovereign. In the evenings, I read books from the community shelf in the lobby, paperbacks left by strangers who had underlined entire paragraphs about loss and hope. And I added no marks of my own, because I had no desire to leave footprints anymore. Occasionally, I would hear laughter in the hallway, other residents receiving visits from children or grandchildren, and I did not feel envy, only recognition, because I knew too well that love can curdle into expectation, and expectation into hunger, and hunger into blame, and I had starved that beast by walking away. Letters began arriving at my old address, forwarded eventually to the apartment office. Envelopes with Ashley's handwriting, looping and frantic, but I instructed Ms. Chen to return them unopened, citing privacy, and when she looked at me, searching my face for explanation, she found none. Some nights, I imagined Ashley sitting amid the boxes at the storage facility where their belongings now waited under her name. Surrounded by sofas she never paid for, dishes she never washed, and I wondered which would weigh more heavily on her, the absence of inheritance or the realization that I had heard every word she never meant for me to hear. But I let the thought drift away each time, because dwelling was a luxury I no longer afforded. I had already paid my dues in full. In time, the calls slowed, the urgency dulled, and I imagine they shifted from rage to disbelief, from disbelief to shame, though I will never know. Because I never answered, never acknowledged, never gave them the dignity of confrontation, I had chosen a different path. One not of argument but of absence. And absence is a presence of its own, heavier than any words left unsaid. I kept to my routines. Morning coffee at the corner cafe where Chloe would nod without asking questions. Afternoons spent walking along quiet streets I had never memorized. Evenings in my armchair beneath the soft hum of a lamp that belonged to no history but mine. And slowly, I felt the weight of fatherhood unspool from my shoulders, not because I had ceased to love what I once built, but because I had finally accepted that love without respect is servitude. On Sundays, I would sit on the bench in the park, watching families gather, children running toward parents with unburdened joy. And I allowed myself the grace to remember Ashley as a child. Before calculation hardened her voice. Before entitlement replaced gratitude, and I did not curse her, nor forgive her. I simply released her to the consequences she had earned. I began to rediscover the world as a man unclaimed, learning small pleasures I had long dismissed, the taste of warm bread from the bakery on 7th. The quiet dignity of polishing my shoes on the balcony. The silence of a room that held no expectations, and in that ordinary rhythm, I found something I had not felt since Maggie's final days: peace. Occasionally, I would pass a hardware store and feel an old instinct to plan, to measure, to build, but I resisted the urge to reconstruct anything physical. I had no interest in foundations others might one day prize more than the hands that laid them. My legacy, if I had one, would be this: a life reclaimed, not through vengeance, but through refusal. One evening, near dusk, I found myself standing at the edge of a hill just beyond the neighborhood, watching the city lights flicker on one by one, and I realized that somewhere, in another corner of Denver, Ashley and Ryan were facing a darkness they could not illuminate with excuses or spreadsheets. And I felt no triumph, only certainty, because they would spend years calling it betrayal, never admitting it was consequence. I was no longer their father in name or duty. I was the echo of their miscalculation. A silence they could neither dismiss nor command. As the wind moved through the grass, I closed my eyes and let the memory of Maggie's voice linger one final time. Not as sorrow, but as benediction, and I whispered. I kept my promise, because I had. She had warned me not to give so much that gratitude died. And I had given everything until nothing remained but the choice to stop. In the quiet that followed, I understood at last that I had not vanished. I had simply stepped out of the frame they built for me. And in doing so, I had become something they never imagined: untouchable. I turned away from the city and walked back to my apartment, where no photos lined the walls, no heirs waited in judgment, no doors demanded keys. And as I locked the door behind me, I felt no loneliness, only completion. I was not dead, I was simply gone. He didn't shout. He didn't beg. He didn't fight to be understood. He simply walked away. And let silence answer every lie ever spoken about him. They called him a burden. They forgot he was the one who built everything they stood on. This was never revenge. This was remembrance. A reminder that even the quietest hearts can choose the loudest ending. By leaving. If this story moved you, take a moment to reflect. Not on what he lost, but on what he finally reclaimed. His dignity. Thank you for listening to Revenge in Silence. Subscribe for more stories of those who rose. Not with anger, but with departure.